Premier Kinew, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Listen, the tone of this conference seems to have been set early by the Nova Scotia Premier, as Tim Houston, as chair of the COF, wrote to the Prime Minister telling him to stop making, and this is his words, unilateral actions that affect provincial jurisdiction. You seem to have a good relationship with the Prime Minister, a good working relationship. How strongly do you back that letter?
Well, I support it. It reflects the consensus of premiers across the country. Our attitude is that Manitobans elected us to get things done and to work with other levels of government, whether that's municipalities, First Nations and Métis, the federal government. So we're always going to work towards having that strong working relationship with the federal government. But at the same time, I think as a provincial leader, along with my colleagues, we do see areas where the federal government has been imposing things on us. And I'll raise the issue of disaster financial assistance as a specific example. Again, without checking with us, without asking if it's okay, the federal government is bringing forward changes to that program which are going to dramatically increase costs for Manitoba. And hey, we're a province that floods. We're a province that has wildfires like many others, and so there's a lot of concerns there. So I think within the context of having a good working relationship, sometimes you got to tell people that you get along with some hard truths. And right now I think premiers are saying we need to get back to the more cooperation.
Yeah, more cooperation, and the premiers have been asking for a First Minister's meeting for quite some time. It's been years, and what's interesting is the change in tone, it seems, in this year's letter, because instead of asking for a First Minister's meeting, they basically say, listen, if you actually really care about cooperative federalism, we're here ready and waiting. What does that say about the level of frustration, if not, I don't know if it's fair to say, personal offense that's being felt around the table right now?
Well, I would love to have a First Minister's meeting. I think the call for a FMM on infrastructure has been long-standing, and when we see the needs, like look at our province, we have major water infrastructure needs that'll help save Lake Winnipeg. We have big transportation infrastructure needs that would help to grow our economy, and we really welcome a federal partner to play a strong role in those things. And what better way than to all sit around a table and try to hash out an infrastructure plan that'll benefit all Canadians. So I do think it is a very reasonable request, and it's something easy to say yes to for the feds.
A reasonable request. Are people feeling angry around the table, though?
I think that what I'm seeing is a strong desire to get more out of the federal government. I think there's a certain amount of frustration, but also like a certain just acceptance of that's how the government at the federal level is operating right now. But my attitude is always, okay, that's how it is, but who's to say we can't do better? So let's keep pushing the envelope, let's keep making those asks to the federal government, and let's try to improve this working relationship for the premiers and the Prime Minister.
Now, as I said, you seem to have a better working relationship right now with the Prime Minister than perhaps some other premiers. Have you been able to have one-on-ones with Justin Trudeau that perhaps raise these issues of greater consultation?
Yeah, we've had a number of meetings, and so I certainly value that. And there's a lot of things we discussed, but of course I do want to leave some of those between the two of us. Yeah.
So a call for more cooperation from Ottawa. But as the premiers gather here in Halifax, it was interesting to hear Indigenous leadership yesterday saying, listen, we want more consultation from the provinces. The ITK, the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, they all spoke to the premiers yesterday, and their message has been very clear. They want to be at the table at all times. They want to be involved with discussions with the premiers, each and every one of these conferences, not just 2.5 hours for a lunch. What do you make of that call? How necessary is that?
Well, I think it's necessary that we have a good working relationship in a nation-to-nation way with these Indigenous governments. But then the question becomes, who are the Indigenous governments? Who should have the seat at the table? And so what I think we heard yesterday, and I'll credit our chair, Tim Houston, for saying, hey, message received. There needs to be more time. There needs to be a revisiting of the structure between the Indigenous and premiers meetings when we have them. And I think I can share that I see a consensus emerging around premiers that what has worked in the past is maybe overdue to be revisited and modernized. And I think as we head into COF in Ontario next year, you'll probably see us look for an evolution in terms of the structure of these meetings. But I think some of those questions that we're going to have to contend with are the valid points being raised by the organizations you spoke about who were present yesterday, but also like the regional questions. What does it mean for Alberta, for British Columbia, to engage in a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous nations? I can tell you from Manitoba, we need to engage with the Manitoba Métis Federation. We've got 63 First Nations, right? And so how are we going to be able, at a national table, to ensure that we're getting that regional balance right as well? Because the conversation on reconciliation, while a national conversation, has a regional flavor in a regional context. And so I think those are some of the important considerations we'll be working on this next year.
But a commitment to work on it before the next COF?
Yeah, no, definitely on a personal level, but I think there's a consensus there amongst my colleagues as well that they want to see this thing evolve, and let's modernize the way we're engaging with Indigenous nations, especially given how important reconciliation is and economic reconciliation and so many of the important issues around healthcare and social issues.
About watching that one closely. Yeah. Listen, I also want to get your reaction before we're done here to what we heard from Danielle Smith, because, you know, without a doubt, the attempted assassination on Donald Trump added a dimension to this conference that was not expected last week. Right. But here we have the premiers reacting to it, and from Danielle Smith, essentially saying that it is a reminder to progressives to not take these personal attacks against conservatives and vilify conservatives. What do you make of that call? What do you take from it?
Well, listen, in Manitoba, we had a very, very dark episode in our election campaign last year, which is when our political opponents tried to politicize the issue of searching the landfill for the victims of a serial killer. Like, it feels awkward even to talk about that now, that they ran ads about the victims of a serial killer, right? That's how dark it was. And it was very divisive in Manitoba. We had a man throwing dirt onto red dress paintings. We had people throwing rocks through windows. Like, when this sort of sentiment gets politicized, I view that as very irresponsible. And we need to ensure that as politicians, all of us, regardless of partisan stripe, are being positive contributors to the public sphere, positive contributors to our national conversation. And so certainly we're going to have vigorous elections and debates about policy differences, but let's keep it about policy. Let's not divide Canadians from fellow Canadians. And so I think that reflecting on what happened to President Trump over the weekend, you know, it's emotional. There's no place for violence in our politics, and I think it's a reminder that as leaders we all have a responsibility to focus on the issues and try to ensure that we're leaving neighbor able to speak to neighbor.
Premier Wab Kinew, thank you for this.
Yeah, thanks for the time.